On today's Conveyor podcast, we're talking to Mark Vinciguerra. He's the leader behind Capital Region Independent Media, more popularly known as the New York VT Media.
Yeah.
What's it?
Yeah, so it's the public facing is NYVT, which is New York, Vermont. NYVTmedia.com is the more public facing website for what we do. Yes.
So what I'm really excited to talk about today is trusted information sources and a traditional industry, newspapers and journalism, as a way to look at how that sector is evolving this day and age. There's a lot of economics changes, technology, even cultural changes that are happening in that space. And to use that conversation with Mark to glean what opportunities there are for us to be better communications leaders and to better both be informed by other forms of media and also to contribute and add to the levels of trust media, obviously to meet our own personal goals and to make the industries, the worlds, the communities that we operate in better informed and better overall. So, Mark, thanks for being here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Quinn, for having me.
So to give me a little bit of a background on how you developed NYVT Media and what your background is and what the business opportunity was when you got started.
Sure. So my background was traditionally, I started literally as a journalist. I was a radio journalist for the most part. I did some print journalism, but for the most part, I was a broadcast journalist. And I ended up venturing into the business side of the newspaper world. That's a whole other story for a lot period of time we don't have here today. But in the more recent times, I was a general manager, publisher of a chain of newspapers for a larger regional company. And we had a mix of traditional, what they call daily newspapers, obviously that come out every day, and weekly community newspapers. And I felt that looking at the media at that time, this was circa 2018 or so, that the better opportunity was in the world of community media, especially in the niche that I felt in upstate New York around the capital region of New York State, Albany, as well as into Western Vermont. And I just took a look at the landscape of those of that environment, if you will, and it ended up being very much. I felt ready to be disrupted and to be modified and to be changed. And it presented an opportunity to both preserve local journalism by doing that, and as well as make a business case by doing that. So I bought my first newspaper, which was the Ravenna News Herald, from my former employer. And since then, we've grown to, we've got well over a dozen titles now in various, probably, I believe we're in 5 counties in New York State and 1 county in Vermont, where we produce these publications. And then we've morphed into a lot of other different avenues as well that I'm sure we'll talk about as we go on.
Give me a bit of the 411 on your business stats. So what's your readership? What is the business model? What are you actually reporting on a regular basis?
Well, generally, and hot off the press, so to speak, I can tell you that the latest numbers as of last week we looked at is our typical reach in a month is about 153,000 people read one of our products, whether that be in any form, whether it be a printed product, the websites that the website that we have, social media, newsletters, whatever it may be. So 153,000 people in a typical month are reading our content. The business model is heavily laden towards advertising support. We do have abilities, and we have some people that are donors. We have people that subscribe to some of the products. We have people that buy them at the newsstands. But far and away, most of the revenue is still from the advertising model. So we put our audience in front of advertisers, and advertisers want to reach our audience either in whole or in segments, and they pay for that opportunity to do so and get their message across.
And from your own first person perspective, what are some of the, what are the most dynamic aspects of this sector of newspapers in a local region?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the reality for many publishers like myself in local community media is it tends to be, I mean, I operate in small rural areas for the most part. We're not in metropolitan city cores, and we're not even necessarily in suburbia. We're in exurbia and urban areas in the United States, specifically again in upstate New York and Vermont. For people like myself, I think the biggest challenge right now continues to be, I mean, there's several. One of them is information. And what we do is provide content and information about the communities that we serve, whether they be geographic communities or they be interest-based communities, such as we have publications that focus on things like pickleball, believe it or not, or dirt track car racing, or local theater groups. So it's interest focus or it's community geographic focus, but it's trying to get that information out to people. I think the biggest issues right now continue to be that information is splintered. People get information in a variety of ways and from different sources, and sometimes because of that, there's a real feeling of is the information I'm receiving legitimate? And you use the president of the United States has coined the term. Sorry about that. Has coined the term fake news. I think that's where one of our biggest challenges are, not being seen as that by the people that use our products.
That's a great topic to talk about. So how much has your constituents, to what degree have your customers and your constituents of the newspaper, the readers of the newspaper, begun to or recently started to care about who you are, who is serving the newspaper, as a result of fake news, change of trust in culture, and how's that affected you potentially?
It's interesting. So that's I guess that's the macro level, and it absolutely exists. It's poll after poll, and we see it with our own eyes. It's partisanship. People can believe that you've got an agenda, but we don't. By the way, we come at things. We believe we come at things from a very neutral standpoint. We're very local. We don't editorialize. The only opinions expressed in our publications or on our websites or social media are those of readers or opinion shapers. They're not by us. We don't endorse candidates. We don't do any of that type of thing. We try to report the facts as we know them and let people make their own decisions. But people will still draw their own conclusions based on how reporting is done, and sometimes we take that criticism because of that. But I think that's the more the macro level. I think the other thing is that people get into their own information silos, and they want to go to sources that confirms their bias. And if you don't confirm their bias, you're automatically labeled as fake news. And that's a tough thing to overcome, and that's a big change, something I've seen over the last 10 years or so, and it's something that we fight hard as journalists and professionals in our field to make sure that we don't have that appearance. To be even more specific, as we purchase, what we've done here is we've purchased properties that were owned usually by multi-generational independent owners, and they've been based in those communities. So sometimes we're seen as the outsider, we very much believe in keeping local people on the streets for reporting and advertising sales. But then from a business standpoint, we can get some better margins, and we can be more efficient by centralizing some back office functions. But some people that aren't used to that want to say that it's an out-of-towner or an interloper that's come in and taken over their media in their local community. It's not true, but that's some of the perception that we have to overcome in the communities that we enter into.
I think it's tremendously dynamic in the sense that people really are operating in a place of abundant information, and so as a result they can inform, and also the ways that they're consuming multimedia have these algorithms which generally are served in a way to keep them engaged. And so it's just an increasingly extreme viewpoint that gets served to them in order to keep them engaged on internet platforms or certain types of multimedia. And what I really find interesting is thinking about the next generation. I'm someone who, as a millennial, I read newspapers, I read magazines, I was excited to get magazines, but I think that the next younger generation wonders why they need that. And the fact that it's hard to sometimes answer that question, like vehemently, why they need it. That creates sort of this open-ended what's going to happen. And it's I think it's wonderful that you have. Let's talk about sort of the business model, because it's maybe one more thing on that point. So I think that there's also this romanticized view that a generation or two ago, that newspapers were unbiased, that like editorial rooms were relatively unbiased, and there was like the standard or sort of blue chipness to the way that the news was generated. Think of like the Walter Cronkite was in every living room type of thing. And now we can't even agree on which late night comedian is what they represent and what their ulterior motive is. And so that's, I think, a false narrative that there's this like romanticized view, because, even in upstate New York, I think that's where muckraking is the right word. The idea of like politically motivated, wealthy, the barons, they ran newspapers in order to actually exert their opinions on voters and on the general public.
Well, absolutely. And many of the papers in the United States are named, you'll have Republican or Democrat, because when they were founded, they were instruments, if you will, of that party or those parties. That's why you see those titles. Hopefully they're not that much anymore, but back in the 19th century, that absolutely was the case. That many of these publications, there were competing publications in almost every major or mid-major town, and they definitely were slanted on the news coverage. So I think you're right. That's a romanticized version of that is from a time that's a little more modern than when these publications were founded, but it's still not as accurate as people would like to your point, romanticize about. So yeah, I mean, it's even more exacerbated today, though, because of the abundance of at your fingertips of information. If you don't agree with something, you can find another point of view pretty easily with your keyboard and whatever device you use, and you'll probably find somebody that will at least confirm your bias, whether they're accurate or not. At least will confirm your bias, and that's what I think we're fighting against. We're fighting against an attention deficit. That there's a lot of information available, and that people don't spend that much time with any bit of it. People talk about multi-screens and things like that. When you sit and watch a television, if you do it all, you usually have a phone or a tablet, or you're doing something else at the same time. The days of undivided attention on the TV and the three major networks being there or whatever in the United States anyway, those days are long gone.
And so, and what is old is new, with Jeff Bezos buying the Washington Post and private equity companies rolling up major newspapers in Canada here. The local news is sort of paper thin, and it's syndicated national news. So there are these sort of news deserts that exist, which sounds like you found a way to kind of limit, or at least keep the lights on in terms of the desert in your area there. And I think what I want to talk about is like the business model, like what is possible. And let's start with historically how it worked. And because it's who owned the printing press, right? And usually it was a wealthy person who could fund and own the printing press. Not everybody could go and print and distribute 1,000, 500, even 20, leaflets or pamphlets, and then they became newspapers. And then the evolution was that advertising was a way to subsidize the creation or even to profit, even though I don't know how profitable it was over like business was at any point in time, or if it was moderately profitable. But the idea was that you would report on something that was informative in a nutritious way. So let's report on City Hall. And then there was a sports section that people would buy to learn about what happened, to the hockey game or baseball game or whatever it was. And then there would be an ad for, travel or something like that. So indirectly, the sharing and distribution of that information of the fifth estate, the like reporting on City Hall, was done by something indirectly shared in that form of media. And then historically what had happened is the internet made distribution of information next to nothing in comparison to running a printing press. And then after that, social media and later stage of the internet changed advertising fundamentally and the performance of ads fundamentally. Is there anything to color in, or is that a pretty good representation of where we are today?
I think you're all over it. I think that's a very good brief but succinct summary that's accurate. I would say the other thing that's happening as we speak is AI. The development of AI is radically altering things again, yet another disruption. And it's a disruption not only for publishers, but it's a disruption for search engine companies as well. People are not Google, traffic using search is down. No doubt about it. People are using AI instead of search, and AI doesn't necessarily take you to a website. So people, traffic overall is starting to suffer because of AI, and that's only going to continue. I would see. There's a lot of nuances in what you said, but generally you got it right. Absolutely. When you say the business model, so the business model was putting together an audience and then using that audience that you've gathered. I always say we have the biggest megaphone in the areas that we serve, right? I can get on that megaphone and shout out what I need. If I want to hand that megaphone to you as the advertiser, that's great. You may not want our full market though. You may want a certain selection of the market. And that's where the old funnel analogy comes in. The top of the funnel is branding and awareness. The bottom of the funnel is actually buying something. So we now serve all points along the way. We can brand your restaurant. Absolutely. We can help you get people to know that your restaurant exists. You're on Elm Street and you're open 6 days a week, noon to 8. I'm making this up, but you get the idea. But I also can get you further down the funnel where tonight you're doing a prime rib special. It's $25 and it comes with a free first drinks free. And it's between 6 and 8. I can get that message out between 6 and 8 in the geographic area right around your restaurant if you'd like. So we can do all of those things now, not just the top of the funnel type stuff, if that makes sense. It's not just branding and awareness that newspaper ads used to be specifically, or if they were about something, they were about a sale that was in the future. Now I can make it immediate. If you tell me you want a flash sale tonight because you have extra prime rib, we can get that message out right away and drive people to your restaurant tonight.
So what you're talking about in terms of business model is almost like the newspaper is a network. It's a network for a geography typically, right? But this could be substituted for a industry publication or association or some other type of publication. But the idea is that a group or an individual wants to reach that audience that pre-exists and gets regular connection, has the permission to be connected with. I think what is really interesting, talking about sort of what historically it was, is that before it was the only way you could reach people in that geography. Like when the printing press and print media was the only way to reach an audience, you would have to go to the newspaper. Whereas nowadays, it has to be more about, it's obviously not the only way to reach that audience, because but help me fill this in. Is it because of the brand of the newspaper? Is it the closeness to the community? And that's the work you have to do to differentiate yourself?
Yeah, Quinn, that's exactly right. So part of the issue that I think, I would tell an advertiser, for example, they may say, well, I can run my ad on Facebook. I'll just use Meta, for example. Nothing against Mr. Zuckerberg and his wonderful operation, but I'll just use the example. So they can run an ad on that. But what is the content that they're up against? I see some of our, let's say, auto dealers in our area, on putting their stuff on content that would be, I don't want to say it's risque, but I don't know that it aligns with their values and brand. Yes, it gets them a lot of people to see their ad. I don't know they're probably being told it's the right people that are in the market for an auto. Maybe that's the case, maybe it isn't. But I think our differentiator is we're trusted, we're local, we have a great brand recognition, and when you come to our site or you're viewing our content, it's not going to be questionable or risque or something you'd be embarrassed to have to show your mom or your kids. It's different than that, and so I think you hit it. Yeah.
So, so I think we really nailed an important part in that modern comms is about the interaction. So what does the interaction mean? But then it's also about multimedia. So what is the medium that you are using to have that interaction? And they're both, there's a cost between the different ways that you do that, and there's different meaning behind how you do both of those things as well. And you've listed out that you have local people. You've told me before that you have local salespeople. You use your filter as like leverage. Like, it's not just a algorithmic ads platform, even though it has its place, but there's a filter that is neighborly, that is sort of vouched or a level of credibility. And how do you see, can you talk about how some businesses you've partnered with over the years have leveraged being more involved in the community through working with you?
It's a great question. Again, some of our best relationships are with companies that don't sell to the public directly. I'll give you an example, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me doing this, but there's a gentleman, his name is Carver Laraway. Carver owns Carver Companies. This man owns 7 different ports, including the port of Queens in our area, but he owns the port of Charleston, South Carolina, as an example. He's got 1,000 local employees. He has trucks all over. He's got gravel pits. He's a major manufacturer. He's got a lot of different things going on. But I can't go to the port of Queens and launch my boat. I mean, that's not what it is. It's a commercial port. They have it's a commercial port. Let's put it that way. But Carver believes in the power of aligning his brand with our brand, because it's important for him to be able to get his message out to the community, to the local community where people see his trucks and his equipment and what's going on down the street at the port, so he can give updates on that. But he also shows that he's a good citizen. There's a lot of things we do that have nothing to do with journalism. Like, for example, I don't say nothing, but they're not traditional journalism. For example, we produce an award show every year. It's called the Top 5 Change Makers, where we have the public nominate who they consider to be the people that are making change in the communities we serve, whether they be the top 5 women, the top 5 youth, the top 5 BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, top 5 businesses, whatever it is. People nominate, and then we have a panel, a blue ribbon panel that votes on them, and we have an award ceremony where we honor these people. Well, Carver puts his name behind that. He's a major sponsor of that because, again, I think he sees the goodwill and he's putting his brand in a very nice place by aligning his values and goals and mission with ours in that regard. We feed thousands of people every year in a program we call Feed Your Mind, Feed a Family, around Thanksgiving time in the U.S., where we have sponsors and donors that help pay, and we provide meals to literally, I think we're over 3,000 families now that we've provided meals for over the last few years. So again, he's a major sponsor there. It aligns with his mission, and it helps in so many ways in community building and orientation. And it doesn't hurt, I'm sure, when it comes to recruiting employees. When if you're looking for a job in the area that he services, or you're working for a company that's ethical, and you're working for a company that really cares. And I think he sees that, and again, that's part of why he supports us. It's a non-traditional advertising relationship. It's not come down and buy a bag of cement from me, but it works for him. And we've got several others like that too in other areas of our distribution area.
Why don't you think more people take this approach when it clearly is an untapped, I would say it's an untapped area to do marketing and to proactively represent yourself and your identity in the community without it just being something that is just done as a byproduct of whatever actions you're doing in the community. So what for any business owner or even person in the community, like what separates the thinking between those folks who do and don't? Because I bet there are some prospects that of yours that you've wanted to work with over the years, and I want to kind of know what maybe the philosophical difference is, or what did they, just more plainly, what don't they get about these opportunities?
I wish I could even answer that better, because then I would make sure that we we rebutted that and got them. But I mean, the people, look, I'm biased in that the people that have worked with us on these, I think, are very enlightened leaders. And it's no surprise to me, Quinn, that I talk about Carver. I was at earlier this week. He's opened his world headquarters. He took over a huge building in Albany, New York, and it's now his world headquarters. It's state of the art. I mean, Carver's a visionary. The man knows how to run a business. Kathy Juckett is the CEO of Telescope Furniture, and based in one of our other markets. Kathy gets it. She is, I can't walk in and buy Telescope Furniture, but I guarantee if you go to a 5-star Michelin rated restaurant, you're sitting on Telescope Furniture. And, I think it's enlightened leadership. They understand the value of local community connections. They understand how important local journalism is. They care about their communities, and they know that without having local journalism there, it's going to harm their communities. It's going to leave a major void that it can't easily be overcome. It's not going to be overcome by bloggers and Substack. It's just not, or Facebook influencers. It's not, or Instagram influencers. It's just not going to be, and they understand that. So I think it's that. I think it's enlightened leadership. The other thing I think is that we in the media, especially in my world of community media, have done an awful job of developing programs like these, and once we do, prospecting and getting this message out to people. I haven't had anybody necessarily tell me, no, that's a terrible idea. I've just had people, I think, that we've been a little early when we've gone into some of these markets, and they don't grasp the full idea. And some of it, Quinn, to be honest with you, is our own employees not grasping the idea as well as they could. The people that have the best relationship with these potential sponsors, that don't, the employees, that they can't wrap their head around. They're so used to having a transactional based business. Quinn, I'm coming to you. I have an ad that you should be buying an ad for me to promote blah, blah, blah. So they don't even think about this kind of perspective. But that's changing. Those employees are starting to change their mind, and they're starting to prospect for people just like that.
Yeah, I think that there's so much alignment in brand building marketing activities versus this hot deal 50% off until the end of the year, because those that means then that you're probably competing against digital banner ads, right? Which are served faster, but if it's a multi-part series, or sponsoring the reporting on a local team or something for a season, then whoever really appreciates that will have that greater affinity for you over a period of time. And it kind of goes back to this community. It's funny that like AI and technology has like created all this scale. I believe in sort of the tyranny of the spreadsheet. Like people, financialization of everything is going so extreme, and to the point where it's almost not, people believe, there's a group of people who think if you can't quantify the ROI in a spreadsheet, then it doesn't exist, or it's too risky to do it. But there's a lot that you can do in terms of trust building. Like what is the quantifiable, how do you quantify trust, right? You feel it. It's a feeling. And yet, while simultaneously on the flip side, we're kind of being through other types of technology, whether it's social media, we're being like completely twisted in what our shared beliefs are, or a personal versus shared beliefs that also is unquantifiable, because there's this like, we're not necessarily rational. It's kind of cycle. There's like a layer between like our rational thinking and like our psychology, and that's where things like marketing, community, trust, relationships exist too. I think.
I'd agree. You're right. I mean, so many people want to be able to measure. I ran this ad and it had this many, the door swung this many times. But it's funny because the beauty of digital, we can serve up like, some people love the idea of now, when you sold traditional newspaper advertising, unless you had a call to action, a coupon or something that someone had to clip and bring in, you didn't necessarily know how it worked. Well, now when we send a newsletter out that's filled with ads, I can tell you how many people clicked on the ad. So if so some of the sales reps love that. They say, look, Quinn, last week, 75 people clicked on your ad. So basically I made you, when you opened your store the next day, there were 75 people in line, right? Well, if you didn't sell anything to them, that's on you. That means there's something in the process. Your website wasn't good enough. Your product wasn't good enough. Your price point was too much or too little. Whatever it is, that's on you. But sometimes that doesn't turn on you. People want to have it both ways. So you're right. There's a tyranny of the spreadsheet saying I want to quantify our ROI, but then sometimes people are also using that as well. Yeah, but those aren't the right people. No, there's 75 people when you opened your store yesterday that were standing outside your door to come in virtually. I know, but now turn that onto yourself, turn that mirror back on you and figure out why those people didn't buy as much as they should have, or didn't react the way that they wanted to whatever your message was. So I think it works both ways.
I want to shift gears and talk sort of about how you operate as an entrepreneur a little bit. So you told me that you have 135,000 people that read one of your publications. I think you said on a monthly basis, approximately.
There's about 153,000 people that interact with our publications in a typical month.
And it's predominantly, is it all digital, or is there print still?
The vast majority of the audience is either derived through digital or social, but there's tens of thousands of people that still read a print product as well.
And is that a weekly, or what's the print? How often are you printing?
So we have a variety. We've got a number of print products that come out weekly in certain communities, and one of them is biweekly. We also have a whole range of printed magazines or specials. Like we just came off in upstate New York, county fairs are huge. I mean, we produce 6 community county fair guidebooks. We're in the middle of doing that right now. That's an example. We produce a summer guidebook that tells you where to go, what to do. These are all available in PDF and online as well, by the way, but printed editions, people love the tangibly touch feel. They get them when they go into the fairgrounds. They're handed out there. So we have a number of printed publications as well that reach a lot of people.
I really want to go. So other than I really want to go to a county fair in like upstate. There's a distant friend. She's at this massive one in Cleveland this weekend, and it's just it's not that far of a drive. It'd be nice to do it.
Yeah.
So and what's the geography? What is the like from to drive from one side of distribution to the other for the area that you serve?
We're probably about just over 2 hours from the northernmost point to the westernmost point. That's maybe 2.5 hours.
And is it a patchwork, or is it like the full filled in sort of area, would you say? Like,
Well, I mean, digitally, it could be the full filled in area because we resell digital marketing services. We could sell something to someone that isn't in an area where one of our newspapers is distributed. And readership on the website and social media comes from all over. You know, our biggest area that readership comes from is the New York City metropolitan area. That's our
wow.
number one source of
because it's expats.
it is
people who work in New York.
Yes, they have country homes. Many people have country homes. You know,
or I was thinking kids. I was thinking kids who live in New York and they want to stay in touch with what's going on back home, basically.
It could be that. It could be some of that, but a lot of it is that there's people that have, they vacation in the area or they have a second home in the area. You know,
what do you call them cottages in New York? What do you call them?
Some people do, yeah. Some people call them cottages, sure.
Or like summer home? Is that the
summer homes, second homes?
Summer home. Okay.
Yeah, seasonal homes. Yeah, we are in the Adirondack Park. We're in the Catskill Park. We serve the Lake George, New York. We're right next to Saratoga. We've got a major, there's a lot of tourist attractions. Hudson, New York is a magnet for tourists. Catskill. So yes, we have a lot of people from the metropolitan area that venture up to our area in the summer and in the winter too for ski season. And many people that have, homes or cottages in those areas too.
And so we touched on the readership, we touched on the geography, 2 hours tip to tip. And what's your head count roughly? I bet you have lots of part-time folks, but roughly what's the like org chart?
We've got about 16 full, 10 part-time, and then I want to tell you somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20, depending on the time, of people that contract work that either are stringers, they get paid per article to report that, or they might deliver papers for us to some areas. So our overall, the number of people that draw a check from us in one way or the other is probably in the neighborhood of 35 to 40.
So, okay. So now I'd like to get into learning about your leadership communications as the business owner here. So, and I think I want to frame it that a lot of the things that you do are not necessarily scalable. You're talking about relationships with local business owners that are literally 2 hours apart from each other. You have a headcount with 16 full-time folks who I assume a bunch of them probably might only see each other at Christmas parties or something because they operate in different geographies and care about different cities and don't know about the other city too well, maybe. So, and then on top of it, layer on the fact that because of this sort of trust and where the news is coming from, you have to be very careful around the reputation of the parent company, the different publications and what you put out there. So there has to be incredible checks and balances. And the business rests on that, like not sleeping at the wheel at that. So as someone who helps folks with personal branding, with their own leadership communications, how have you scaled to this size, and what are some things that you do to make sure that your team's empowered and they're aware of these opportunities and risks, it's quite daunting. It feels daunting to me.
Oh yes, and it is. It is. I guess I'm a big believer. You and I've talked about this. I'm a big believer in. I've always been a believer in leadership. I've read people, whether it be Richard Branson or Jack Welch, or you name it. There's all these different people. I've gone to trainings. I've very much believe you keep the saw sharpened, right, so to speak. You need to constantly be learning, right? You never can rest and say I've reached a destination. There is no the destination is always modified and changing, if you're, in my opinion, if you're a good leader. But I think the biggest thing is how well you surround yourself with great people. If anything, I'm a connector. I like to have good relationships with people. I can draw on relationships from 30 years ago in a different era, in a different place. If I need to. I feel that that's been a benefit to me. My best friends are my best friends when I was 4 years old. We still get together. We live in different parts of the country. We just had our annual get together a couple of weeks ago. But when it comes to leadership, I think it's being able to use those attributes, get really good quality people, give them the resources they need to succeed within reason, and get out of their way. That's what I try to do. Now, some may tell you there's days I might not do that as well as I should. But the reality is, if you are micromanaging, I always tell people, if I need to know your job as well as you do, then I really am wasting my time. I need to unkink the hose, right? I just got done reading a book about the best CEOs are lazy, right? I mean, but it's not that they're laying back on the beach and sipping Mai Tais. It's that they're not. They're trying to unkink the hose always. Where is our trouble? Where are we having problems? Where's our pain points? Where are we not productive? And how do I fix that? How do I spend my time to make this better for the people that are doing the work? We have a lot of, I'm a big believer in annual reviews, having an honest dialogue with your folks on at least an annual basis. You should be doing it much more than that, much more frequently than that, but definitely doing that. We try to get together as a group a couple to 3 times a year to, I'll show them the metrics. They see the financials. Some people, that takes them back. They don't know, wow, it's privately held. I'm 100% owner. They're seeing my finances. Well, if I'm asking them to put their blood, sweat, and tears into this every day, then I think I owe it to them to let them know the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to finances. Most of our employees have been here. We've got people that have been here, not working for me, but for the companies that we've acquired. Some people have been there 40 years. It's their whole career. Wow. I think that says a lot about my predecessors, but also about what we've been able to do. And we know this ride isn't for everybody, Quinn. We know that. When we take over some, there tends to be some flight, because we do, with the good comes the bad. We also demand a lot more accountability. We also measure a lot more things than maybe some of the predecessors did, because I'm going to share the financials, but I'm also by extension going to ask you, we're going to measure your performance. We want to make sure that you're hitting your goal and that we're helping you get there. So I think it's all of that and then some. But my main thing would be hire good people and get out of their way. Give them the tools they need to succeed, and make sure your hire is the best possible person. Take your time with hiring. Take your time. It's so important to hire the right people as much as you can.
I don't know which podcast it was I was listening to, but there was some quote, and he said that he was talking to this old general, this U.S. general, and he says he's in charge of giant amount of, like, a huge amount of people that he was looking after, this general, and said, how do you delegate? And then the general's answer was, in as few words as possible. Mm-hmm. That's because as soon as you describe or do, any sort of input, then you're creating constraints that they won't work around. And so if you do it in as few words as possible, it's true empowerment, and you can actually do a lot more, I think. So that sounds a lot like your philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, if you had met, so I have two, the way we're organized, I have 2 people that mainly run the day-to-day operations of the business. One lady's named Julie, the other is Warren. I trust them with obviously my life. I mean, that's what they do. And I think they're the public face more than I am. I mean, I don't need to be at every place where they need to be. And it's, again, I think if you met them, if you know someone from the area, if Warren's out there, if you look at our social media, our Facebook lives, he's out there almost every day. He's doing a Facebook live. He's just got a magnetic personality. People gravitate to him, and he's the face of the franchise. I mean, I don't need to take that spotlight. That should be his, and the same with Julie in her own way. It's very important to me that you get the right people in place and you let them do their jobs and give them the tools they need.
Are there any tactical? Let's talk about on the ground floor. So how do you scale up these? Not scale up. Let's avoid the word scale. But how do you get folks moving in the right direction around hitting goals, but also just nurturing relationships, increasing the readership, and doing a lot of this relationship building that we've talked about before is like hard to pin down in terms of ROI, and also maintains that high quality too. Any tactical things that you do?
Well, I mentioned that, I share the financials and with the town hall type meetings that we have, but one of the things we believe in is SMART goals, right? The SMART goal process. So each of the department heads at those town hall meetings get up and put out their SMART goals for the coming year, and they recap how they did as a unit for the past year. So again, it's transparent. We all know what each other is trying to do and accomplish. And I think that, to constantly reiterate that is important, to measure against that. One of the things when it comes to sales, it's relatively easy to measure. I mean, we know what each rep did. We can measure how many accounts they had, whatever the measurement is, we can slice and dice the info. But it gets more difficult with some other positions. And we're on a regular basis, we look at the way that the position is structured, what they're responsible for, how much time it should take, and then we shift if needed. If we've got a clerk that we said is going to do X, Y, and Z, and they're working, 25 hours a week right now, and we're going to give them something else, we want to make sure that is there something that they're doing that they've done just because, it doesn't really have any relevance anymore, or do we need to give them more hours because it's going to take longer now that we're giving them more responsibility. So it's constantly looking at their positions and making sure that they're created as they should be for maximum efficiency in each position.
I've really appreciated the chat today. I think I've got a lot of clarity on the evolution of on communications generally, and how much control or how much of a centerpiece I'd say newspapers traditionally have had, and what a huge opportunity local news has right now. I think that if you have, are you doing anything in terms of being a voice or being like a thought leader when it comes to local news? Are there associations like nationally and things like that around?
Yeah. So I'm a board member of the New York Newspaper Publishers Association. I'm the past president of the New York Press Association. And I'm very involved in the News Media Alliance, which is a national organization. Matter of fact, we do fly-in day, we call it, where we go to Washington, D.C. every year, and we meet with lawmakers and talk to them about the issues that are important to local media now, and potentially how they can help us and keep that dialogue open. And I'm on that group as well. Locally, I've been on Chambers of Commerce. I serve on some charitable boards. St. Catherine Center for Children here in the Albany area, I serve on their board. I serve on the board of the Saratoga County Fair. So county fairs I'm very involved in that. And that's another thing, Quinn, I believe, and I know you believe. I think it's really important to get back to your community. And the older I get, I just had a milestone birthday. I'm not going to get into that, but it starts to deal with my mortality more and more. And I have two adult children, and it gets me thinking about, what do you want to have what do you want to pass along? What do you want people to remember you by and for? And that's become more and more important to me as well. And I think leaving the world a better place than you found it is a really simple way to think of that.
I really appreciate the chat today. Thanks for being a part of the Conveyor podcast. Learned a lot. And stay in touch for when the episode goes live.
I appreciate that, Quinn, very much. And anybody wants to get a hold of me, you can, feel free to give my contact information.